To round up a big topic from the week, candidates vying to be Houston's next mayor are taking on education. Saturday's forum, titled Rethink Education, was held at Houston Baptist University and featured 4 people hoping to replace Anise Parker in November. One of the questions focused on using tax dollars to fund universal all-day pre-K. All candidates agreed tax dollars spent on pre-K would be dollars well spent.
And then advocating for more dollars to be spent on our young people early on. And so I'm going on record today saying I am a big proponent for early childhood education.
When we did the HSD bond, that was about 3 or 4 cents of additional tax. And we went out and said very upfront, look, this is going to cost additional money. I'm sorry, but these schools are just in god-awful condition. You know, you wouldn't send your kids there. I wouldn't send my kids there, so we shouldn't ask anybody else to send their kids there. And that argument was accepted across the city. In the most conservative Republican boxes, we carried a tax increase by a substantial margin. So I think the public is ready for this and willing to do it. You just got to be willing to put it before them.
From diverse
Other participants in our forum yesterday included Chris Bell and Ben Hall. So does improving education in Texas start with providing full-day funding of pre-K, or is it a costly experiment, as some have said? That's our topic this half hour. We want to hear from you on our Fox 26 Facebook page. You can also weigh in on Twitter. Be sure to use the hashtag Fox26forlife. Joining us live in the newsroom is our roundup panel led by our senior legal analyst Chris Tritico, our news analyst Mustafa Tamiz, and public policy analyst Jackie Valley. So what kind of an influence would a Houston mayor have on education?
Such a great question. None. The mayor doesn't have the jurisdiction, and no mayor in Texas has any jurisdiction or authority over an independent school district, which is run by its own elected board, and they hire their own leader, the superintendent of schools. But I think a mayor, especially in a city the size of Houston, can influence how education is treated and handled in the school districts within the mayor's control. And so while they don't have any authority to dictate what happens, I think they do have the ear of the public in talking about those issues, and I think that's where they can effectuate change. Now, back to the original question also, is early childhood development, is an investment in early childhood all day a good investment or just a social experiment? Every study indicates that the more time that you put a child in a classroom in front of a teacher, that learning occurs and they advance. And one of the things I think that we have done wrong in the United States is keeping kids out of the classroom and not focusing as much on education as we should.
Yeah, and knowing that if you don't learn to read by 3rd grade, that there's 60% chance that you're going to drop out. And that's an enormous statistic to kind of understand. And when we have such a high poverty rate in HISD, 80% of the kids that go there form in some kind of a poverty index, that means that they're not getting the nutrition that they need. That means that they're not prepared for kindergarten when they come into our system. And if they're not prepared for kindergarten, they're not going to learn to read by 3rd grade, therefore they're going to drop out. Since we know this, we have to start fixing it and just stop talking about it. So I think that in the mayoral forum, Adrian Garcia, Bill King, and others that took the position on supporting pre-K is a very important thing for all of us to realize, because by making it important, that's how we're going to solve the problem.
Supporting pre-K for the mayors necessarily involves them saying they would support a tax increase, but not their tax increase.
Right.
It would be a school district's tax increase, which is much easier for them to support.
Right. To answer all of the questions, a mayor of Houston will have a lot of influence, and so stating their position on education, they're trying to tell people, this is how I feel about education. Can they actually do something about it? Of course not. It's not within their purview, and at the ending of the day, once this mayor, whomever it is, gets elected, he will have so many serious issues like pensions and infrastructure and potholes that education will not be something of significance. But what these statements do and can do is maybe reach out to our HISD board of trustees, who actually are the ones who are responsible for this. And the mayor will be working indirectly with these trustees, and so at least the trustees can get an idea of which candidate has a position, or how his position is on education, and that really will help with the relationship.
And I got to go to social media, but can a mayor provide political cover to the school board when they're talking about tax increase like this.
Yes, and in San Antonio, the Mayor Castro used part of the sales tax to fund early childhood education. So the mayors actually have jurisdiction because they can create tax revenue that can be used for early childhood education.
All right, let me go to Sally. She's monitoring our social media.
I want to get your take on one comment from one of our viewers this morning who posted on our Fox 26 Facebook page. Larry says, pre-K is free daycare and not education, just another give-me program for Democrats to buy votes using tax dollars.
Well, I completely disagree with that, and the governor of the state of Texas, which last time I checked was not a Democrat, is completely in favor of early childhood development because it's not daycare, it's education. And the sooner we get children in front of a teacher and the sooner they start learning, the better off they are all in all. And the Republicans in Texas are in favor of early childhood development.
My mother was a teacher in pre-K for 40 years, and she took her job very seriously, and she felt that this was the training ground for education for her students. So I definitely strongly disagree with that. The governor has made early childhood education, one of his emergency items, and he's been very active on that.
And he's in favor of all-day education,
and
right?
he is in favor of that. So the leadership, our Republican leadership, is in favor of this. So I disagree with that statement, and so does our Republican leadership.
This is not a Democrat-Republican issue. This is really about moving children along.
Yeah, and it's a long-term investment that if you invest early, from 0 to 6 is when development really happens. And if you invest in that time frame, you will pay less for prisons down the road. So this is not a Republican or Democratic thing, but it does require funding, and which sometimes becomes a challenge for Republicans, that they do believe in this cause, but at the same time, if you're not willing to fund it, then you really don't believe in it.
And it's hard to say to the public in times like this, to say, we're going to raise your taxes, but here's why we're going to do it.
But our legislature and our governor has said we are going to fund education at a higher level than we have in the past. They have made it put it at the forefront of the session last time. You will see it again next time. They have put it at the forefront of their legislation. So, you know, it's not a Republican or Democrat issue, but Democrats have always liked to say, well, Republicans don't believe in education. They no longer can say that.
Well, and I think that the one way that Republicans can move away from that is if they fund this part, because we've been underfunding education. I think there's broad consensus that if you go to the public and say, we will raise your taxes for a couple of pennies, but we'll do it to create pre-K, I think that they'll find that successful. We've seen that in school bond elections across the state. School bond elections win because the public supports having better schools, and if we're specific about pre-K, the public will fund it.